Today, we are going to talk about how you can use language to keep your child safe. Before we get started, I'll let Stephanie and Melissa introduce themselves quickly. Whoever wants.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Bergener-Vader. I've been a speech pathologist since 2009, and I'm a parent of 2.
And I'm Melissa Sartori. I've also been a speech pathologist since 2009, and I'm a mom of 2 girls, ages 1 and 4.5.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie. I am a speech therapist and the founder of Toddler Talk. Every parent undoubtedly is worried about keeping their child safe in one way or another. And there's different levels of concern that you might have. There is like the low level of concern, like, I don't want you to pick your nose because that's gross. And you might catch a cold if you pick your nose and lick your finger. It's just something I don't really want you to do, but the risk is pretty low. And then there's the medium level of concern. Like, if you do this, you're probably going to get hurt. So maybe your child tries to pick up a piece of firewood or something that's going to give them a splinter, or they're climbing on a bar stool or a chair, and if they fall off, they're going to get hurt. Then we have the high level of concern where you absolutely do not want your child to do this. They are in serious danger if they do. So these may be situations like your child is running out into traffic or they're playing with fire. We want to stop them immediately to keep them safe because they're in serious danger if they continue. So to get started, I want to just talk about how we can use language differently to improve our children's following of our directions or listening to us based on the different levels of concern, whether it be a low level of concern, like no, don't pick your nose, or a medium level of concern, such as no, don't climb on that chair, or a high level of concern, like no, do not run out into the street. And I know you guys both have lots of examples from your kids and working as speech therapists. So whoever wants to kind of jump in and get started, that would be awesome.
So I think you bring up a great point, Stephanie, about the word no, and that the word no can be used for lots and lots of different contexts. And often we find ourselves using the word no maybe too often. So using no, don't pick your nose. No, put your shoes on. No, don't run out in traffic. If you use the word no for every single context, it starts getting sort of diluted and it starts losing its meaning. And we've all encountered situations where we almost see kids just ignoring the word no because they hear it so often. And a lot of times it's something like, no, don't pick your nose. And then the kid does it, nobody stops him. So he thinks that the word no is something that can be ignored. And so we sort of try to think, can I say something else in this context to have the same result, but be a little more picky about when I use that word no, so that it has more meaning when I do use it. I think in a lot of situations, we can avoid using the word no altogether. And I almost want to save the word no for sort of 2 scenarios. For me, this is me, everybody's different. I like it for like the big situations, like no. And you saw my face and you heard my voice and I changed the way I was behaving, and the word no was very focused and very pronounced. And if you don't hear the word no a lot, that might get your attention and you may actually stop what you're doing if you're a child. I also want to briefly mention that we use the word no to respond to questions like, did you want more juice? Yes or no. And so if you overuse the word no, or children view the word no as I'm in trouble or being bad, then sometimes when no is used in response to a question, their response is, oh, I'm bad. I'm not doing the right thing. Oh, you're mad at me. Oh, I must be picking my nose again, or whatever it is. So I like to think, can I use my voice? Can I use my tone? Can I use my face and make no this big thing? But then try a couple other strategies for these small and medium events.
Great. Can you give us an example of a particular situation that might be like a low level risk for your child, what they're doing, and then what you would say instead of no?
I will give you an example that happened about 4 hours ago with a child. And this child has an emotional response to the word no. This child has heard the word no so often that if they hear it, they get upset. Yes, and because they've heard the word no so often too, and assume that somebody's upset with them. So I intentionally try not to use the word no, but I also just coming out of my mouth, I try to rephrase it in what I want that child to do. So what we were doing was we were coloring with markers, and we had paper, and the child wanted to draw on my arm. And I was like, I kind of don't want you to draw on my arm, but is it really dangerous? No. Is it like anybody going to get hurt? No. Am I going to have to wash my arm? Yeah, not a big deal. And what I said, I moved my arm away and I said, paper, draw on the paper. And that was all I did. I didn't say no. I didn't have any correction. All I did was a positive statement to say what I was wanting, which was I wanted them to draw on the paper. And then they were like, yay, and they started drawing on the paper. And then I complimented them. I said, you're drawing on the paper. I love your drawing. And then we talked about the drawing on the paper. So I just moved my arm away and made it positive without any correcting or using the word no. And then what's important to note too is that this child does have safety awareness issues, and I wanted to save it if it was a time I needed them to really respond and be safe with their body. So that happened today. That's not even like a made up scenario, because I think we all do this all the time. I know that Melissa, you have a baby. Well,
she's not really a baby anymore.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. What are some things that you do at your house, Melissa?
We try to use some consistent phrases that again aren't that no or stop, to try to save those for those safety moments. We use a lot of saying like all done, or sometimes we'll do some redirecting of activities. So like, for example, she's 14 months, right? So she's walking right now and loves to get into everything. So this morning I was trying to get some work done on the computer, and she's over here trying to push the bright red button that turns off the computer. I don't know who makes this button bright red. It's really not cool.
Melissa's the same person who does elevator buttons to be red.
Yes, exactly. So she, of course, like goes right to that. And I know if she hits it, she's going to turn off the computer, right? Again, not safety. Is it going to annoy me? Absolutely. My instinct is to be like, no, stop. But really, I had that 1 second to catch myself. Oh, we're all done computer, and move over and show her this other, I don't know what it was, garbage truck toy that she could play with that also lights up and has sounds and is very exciting, to redirect away from that computer button. So that one works really well for her. For us, she doesn't have that emotional reaction to no and stop yet, but I almost want to instill that so that if she does something dangerous, and she's a climber and she's already fallen a couple times off the stairs because she just goes for things, I want to be able to save that. If I say stop, that she's going to stop, because there's this reaction of like, well, that's big and that's different, and I don't hear it all day long. So we use all done a lot and then try to redirect. We also use that same strategy of trying to tell her what we want her to do. So our big one recently in the backyard was climbing on the picnic table, like on top of the picnic table, and then standing up and like, doing the happy dance, like, look what I did. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we practiced a lot with her, telling her, Hattie, sit down. Hattie, we sit down. We sit down at the table, and physically moving her little body and sitting her on the seat part of the picnic bench. It took us 2 weeks of like 100 times a day, like, Hattie, sit down. Hattie, we sit down. Hattie, we sit down. But now when we go in the backyard, it's been like 2 weeks, and she doesn't try to climb up there anymore, because she knows like, this is my space. This is what I do here. And if she were to climb, I'm pretty sure I could say, Hattie, sit down, and she would do it, because we worked through that routine over, and let me tell you, over and over and over, because it could have been a safety thing. And my other concern was, if I had yelled no or stop while she was up there, she could have been startled, absolutely, and fallen headfirst right off that table. So I think it's hard as a parent. We often, or as a therapist too, like we often, our instinct is that reaction of like, no, don't do that. But that 1 second, if you can pause yourself before you say, no, stop, don't do that, can give you 1 second to change maybe what you might have said into something else.
Yeah. And I love how you mentioned that it took 2 weeks.
Oh
And I
God.
know you
Yeah.
said before that it's really an investment in the long run, because I'm sure those 2 weeks were hard, and it's a lot easier to maybe say no or do something else, as opposed to continually redirecting her to sitting instead of standing on top of the picnic table. And I think that's important to highlight, that it takes time. But then in the long run, it might saves you time and worry and helps keep your little girl safe.
I think too that I think it takes thinking about it in that way. My parents, or even my husband, I think their instinct is more of like the no, don't do that, because that's instinctual of what we do. But me trying to spin it around is like, for example, I want our backyard to be a safe, mostly safe space where the girls can kind of have some independent practice. And so if we don't redirect that picnic table, well, what's my other choice? Am I constantly going to have to watch that table? Am I going to have to take the table away? Like, I don't want that. I want them to have this thing. So how can we adjust the situation to fit what I need it to be for the girls? Again, like, this is the long game, but it took 2 weeks of every single time we were in the backyard, like 500 times. Even my older one would be like, Hattie, sit down, Hattie, sit down, because she knows that that's what we had to do.
I can hear her saying that. And she's
Right?
sitting down too. And I'm sure you guys were talking about, I'm sitting down. Look, your sister is sitting down. So everybody learns the word sitting down. And I have seen you interact with Hattie. And you know how you were saying, like, with the computer button, you told her all done. You don't only use the word all done when she's doing something you don't want her to do. Your family uses the word all done in a lot of contexts where she really understands it. Like, she's finished eating. She doesn't really want to do it anymore. So she knows she can say all done.
All done.
And so you don't have that emotional charge with the term all done.
Absolutely.
Where, I'm only correcting you. It's like, I use all done because I'm all done, so your daughter understands the word, and you're using that word in lots of contexts where it all
is learning.
Is learning. Well, she's learning. Is learning. But you're being careful not to have that. I'm only saying all done with a mad voice, and now you're sad, and for a low level situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what suggestions would you guys have if you're practicing with a child or working with a child who does have an emotional response to no? Like, what's 1 or 2 things that a parent could do starting today to help reshape that emotional, or I guess maybe that's not the right question to ask, but
like reactive?
Reactive. Yeah.
I think, just to clarify what we're saying, is sometimes kids hear, no, put your shirt back on. And when they hear the word no, they think, I'm sad, you're mad at me, or, oh, I'm gonna, or then they, now they're not interacting with you, or something like that. And then,
or the other side of it, where as soon as they hear the word no, even for something tiny, like, no, don't put that there, they immediately fall to the floor in tantrum.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
you say, like,
sad,
no, don't put it there. And they're just, and now you have this really fun tantrum on your hands, right? Any of those reactions.
So the fun way and because this comes up in therapy where
a lot,
and the way that I always find this out is we're working on maybe answering yes and no for a question. And I'll just be a nerd for a second and clarify that there's 2 types of yes and no questions. There's the yes and no for facts, like, is this blue? Are you a cat? Are you hungry? That's a fact, even though I don't usually know the answer to that one. And then there's desires, like, do you want milk? Do you want to go to bed? That's like what they want. And so sometimes I'll start with a yes or no question about facts, because I usually know the answers to that, because I don't know what kids want all the time. And so I'll say something like, is this pencil blue? And they'll say, no, it's not blue. And the kid goes, she said no. And I'm like, I'm just talking about, it's not, well, here, I'll cover that. It's not blue. And so what I will do with parents is we'll set up silly yes and no time. Like, does the hat go on my ear? No. Does the hat go on my nose? No. Does the hat go on Mr. Potato Head? Yeah. And then I make it silly. So the word no, and you also heard how my voice was like, no, like, oh, it's not that, so I can kind of desensitize the word no. Just that word, not even that, because this is yes and no. This isn't even no, don't touch that. This is the word no. And the same can be with stop, because this, Melissa, you're bringing up the word stop.
Yeah.
So we can have cars and be like, go, stop, ready, set, go, stop, and I can make it a game. I can be silly and I can just be showing and not putting anything on the child. Like I can do my silly yes and no and answer my own questions all day long and desensitize them from the word and then sort of build it back up into like, which context do I want to use it in? And that's, those are some thoughts I have. Melissa, what do you think?
I like those. Those are fun. Those are great. I also think that for a lot of my families, like in therapy, we just have to take a break from the word no for a while. Like mostly from the, not like yes or no questions, but more from the contextual of like the negative directions, like no, stop, don't do that, those types of ones. And so if I have two caregivers, mom and dad and grandma, whoever, I have two caregivers, we will talk about, we are taking a break from the word no and try to get both caregivers to help catch each other when they say it, because we often say it so much that we don't even hear that we said it. But if both caregivers or multiple caregivers are kind of attuned to working on this, they can often catch each other like, hey, you said it. Oh, you said it. And then immediately, as soon as somebody says it, because even if we're working on it, I know they're going to say it because they say it a lot. That's why we're in this situation, is immediately flip it around. So we mentioned this a little bit earlier, trying to use a phrase in a positive manner of guiding what we want to happen. So my example with the picnic table, instead of no, get down, or no, don't stand there, the positive thing, what I really want her to do is sit her little bottom down, right? I'm not really saying like, don't stand there because of XYZ. Like I'm really just saying, I need you to sit. This is what's safe, or get down, or whatever the thing is I need her to do. And so as soon as we catch each other saying, no, don't color on the wall, we immediately turn it right back around to that positive, color on the paper. Here's your paper. And try to catch each other. And then as they practice, and as that becomes like their thing for the week to practice, they decrease that use of no. And then as we take away some of that reactivity, then we can build it back in as needed.
Great. Thanks for sharing those ideas. And I just want to highlight again that you talked about this happening over the course of a week. And so this really is like reshaping the way that you talk to your child about safety is not going to happen overnight. And they aren't going to all of a sudden start listening to you or know what you mean. It takes time. And I think that's important to anticipate that, or to go in knowing that it's going to take time, because these things don't happen overnight. And I think this is a perfect time to kind of segue. We've talked a lot about the low level concern, like the low risk situations. How would your language or the way you approach a situation change if your child is at risk of getting hurt? Like if they do something, they're probably going to fall, maybe they scrape their knee or they bump their head. How would your language change in those situations, if at all?
I still find myself using the positive, because I'm going to give an example. So Melissa, this is the low level example, but she said, no, don't climb on, don't color on the wall. Now, someone like Hattie, she's 14 months. She does not necessarily understand the little negation words that we use, like don't, or won't, or can't. Or shouldn't. So I've heard a parent say, no, don't climb up on the table. And I'm just looking at the child, and I could tell what they heard was wah, 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 something
Climb
on the table. Climb on the table. Because they can't understand all those little helper words that make it negative, right? You can imagine in a foreign language, like imagine you're learning English as a foreign language. You're like, wow, how did the climb on the table become don't climb on the table? Like that's opposite. And so I almost think it's just as important in those safety situations to just say what I want to happen. Down, instead of no, don't climb on the table, I might say down. And my voice won't be down. Right. With this level 2 situation and a level 3 situation, I'm going to get that like volume up. I'm going to change my face. I'm going to probably make my language simple. Yeah. I'm going to make my language simple. I'm going to use a gesture. Like I'm, we all have that mom face down. Right? Down. You know that face, Melissa. Yeah, you have that. Yeah.
I do.
And they go, whoa. And then when I correct it, then my face changes and I say, oh, you're down. But I still don't think that saying a long sentence about what I don't want them to do is going to be effective. Now, that's when I will start busting out my word no. Yeah. Because what I want is stop and then correct. So it might be no. And if I use it sparingly, I'm hoping the child will pause a moment. And then I say what I want to happen while I'm running over, like making it stop. Like if they're running into the street, I might say, no, sidewalk. That might be what I would say. Like it's real simple. That would work for any child of any age, any person. No, that makes them stop. And then sidewalk is what I want to have happen. But if I said, no, don't go in the street, they might hear street and they're like, ooh, what's happening in the street? Like, no. So that would be my style. That doesn't mean it's the right style. That's the Stephanie style. What about you, Melissa? What would you guys do at your house?
I think those safety moments are more instinctual, that you just say what you say because something's about to happen. So I definitely will use a no, a stop. I'll often use their name because that's going to call their attention.
It makes the stop happen.
It makes a stop happen. So any combination of those, that tone of voice, that volume, and then I don't know. I think I'm trying to think of like what have they done recently? We're like moving some stuff around in the girls' room, and so their like lamp was like on the floor, which I don't know. It was on the floor, whatever. Except it was on, and then it had gotten hot. And here comes Hattie, like, oh, let me try and like touch this hot freaking light bulb. And I knew it was hot. And so I yelled, Hattie, stop, no. And she like totally had that big reaction. And then she just plops her bottom down and just starts crying. Now, do I like that I made her cry? Of course not. But I stopped her from burning her hand. Right. So it did what I needed it to do. And then of course I consoled her and moved the lamp, of course. Now she's little. So for her, that was like the end of the situation. Like I'm going to give her love. We're going to recover. And then I'm going to fix the situation. I moved the lamp. So that's not on the floor anymore. For my older one, if it had been a similar situation, she's 4.5. She's very verbal. We would later, after I made her cry and saved the moment and recovered, we would talk about why that wasn't a safe thing or why that wasn't a good choice. We talk a lot in our house about safe choices, like not to try to put not like a penalty, but like, hey, was that a safe choice? And why am I not? And let's talk about it. Let's talk about, if it had been my older daughter, like why we shouldn't touch a light bulb. Oh, you don't know why. Let's talk about it. Light bulbs get hot. If we touch it, what happens? Oh, we burn our finger. Then what happens? And she would probably know, like it would hurt and I would cry and I'd have to get a Band-Aid, or she might think like I burned my hand off and go to the hospital, and I would say probably not. Let's explain, these different levels, because she's trying to figure out, safety wise, like what she calls like a medium deal versus like a big deal, which means hospital or like doctor visit or whatever. So using after the moment, using some language to talk about why, or to use those descriptors of like, it's hot, or that would be sharp, or that could cut you, or whatever the situation is, that then they're thinking about that again for the long term. that next time they have this awareness of like, oh, I'm going to touch this cool thing. Oh, wait, mom told me it could burn me. So now I'm not going to touch it. Or maybe I'm still going to try again because that's how I learn. But then mom tells me to stop again. And by the third time or the fourth time, we have talked about it and I have learned, or I have still touched it. And now I
learned the
also
hard
have
way.
some incidental learning, that kind of thing. So for us, for the older ones, or when they're at that verbal level, being able to talk through the reasoning is really important at our house.
Can you just,
I will build on that too, Melissa, where I'll say, I yelled, no, stop, because
Yes.
I did not want you to be burned.
Yeah.
Like at the conclusion, I'll sort of tie it in together, because that's how we sort of develop that meaning of the word without them always having a negative response. To be like, oh, my mom really busted out the angry face because she cares about my safety. Like it brings back to this like, I'm being taken care of feeling, and there's a reason for it. But if I use that, no, stop, don't, that's my favorite pencil, I don't want you playing with it, then they're like, well, that wasn't really worth it.
Right.
Yeah. And I just want to circle back because Melissa, you were talking about if your child is verbal. And I just want to loop back and kind of give a few scenarios or maybe skills that a child is doing when you would kind of go into more explanation and teaching. Like if my child X, Y, or Z, then I would do that. Or maybe if my child is, at a different level, like what level would you just correct them, comfort them, and then move on?
Good question. I don't think it's black and white, first of all. I think for a kid that has some comprehension, some understanding of I don't know how to answer this question. I know what I'm thinking in my head, like just being verbal is not necessarily the answer. So Steph, maybe you can process what I'm thinking, but I'm trying to explain the thought of like Hattie's level, right, was just no, stop, now comfort and move on. And then Caroline was like, let's talk about all this like big fancy stuff. And in the middle, there's also this level of being able to say like, no, ouch, or boo-boo, or something in the middle that's still trying to say like, you're going to get hurt without like, you're going to go to the doctor and then you're going to get a shot. Way too much.
Right. They almost need to understand the like cause effect.
Yeah.
Like if I spill my drink, I'll be wet. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I could say that in advance. Like I could almost show it with a toy where I'm like pretending to spill, and then the kid might be like, oh, then I bet he's wet, and have that understanding of this thing leads to this thing. And I don't necessarily need to be able to say it in a sentence, but if the child talks about something that happened, even if it's like fell down, broke, then you're like, oh, you really got that there was like this thing that happened and it had this result. And if the child is maybe even using language or demonstrating understanding of that, then I would do what you were saying about like the light bulb is hot, ouch, ow, and I would put a Band-Aid on it, like, and so that there's this understanding of if I touched it, it would be ouch, the like first and then. Yeah. And I think once they could do that, you could kind of build on it beyond the just correct and move on, but kind of give like a little reason that's appropriate for their language understanding level. Yeah. Because if you go really big into, so once upon a time, there was a little boy who touched the light bulb. He was just like you, and then it's like a 15-month-old, he's gone, like you're not going to do that. But they do because they do get to the point where they're looking at you and they're like, I'm not sure I'm going to believe you. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm going to not touch it because I'm not, I don't see any reason not to, and you're like, but there is a reason. I will now let you know what that is.
Right. And I would love to hear a little bit more. You've kind of suggested to the idea of using play as a teaching opportunity for these safety situations. And I'd love to hear an example that either made up or from real life that you've incorporated play to teach a child about a safety situation to prevent it from happening, so you don't have to say no or stop in the moment?
So all right, I'm gonna wing it. If I was gonna, if it was light bulb, let's say I lived in a house, because this light bulb thing was like, okay, it happened once, we were moving the room, whatever. But let's say I just like, I lived in a theater and there's like hot light bulbs everywhere. I don't know. Maybe somebody lives in a theater. I would probably get some toys that my kid likes. Like, let's say I got like a sheep and a pig. And then over here's a light bulb. And I'll probably act out like, doopa 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 doo. And he touches it and he goes, ow! And he's like, it's hot. Oh, look, he has a boo-boo. Because this light bulb's hot. Don't touch it. You know, and we tell him, don't touch it. Oh, I'm going to get a Band-Aid. Oh, we got the medicine. Oh, put it on here. And then the next day, the other guy goes up and we go, uh-oh, what's going to happen? He touched it. Ow, it's hot. You know, we kind of acted out and the kid's laughing, but then we're acting out the no, stop, don't touch it. He hurt his paw again. Like I've literally done this kind of thing where you're acting it out. So it's not the child that's hearing the no, but sometimes the kids get into it and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to tell them not to do it. You know, no, pig, you know, because
ouch, no. Yeah.
Oh, and then they want to get another Band-Aid. So they kind of get that there's this like thing that happens and here's the consequence, thing that happens and here's the consequence. So we can act it out when it's not on them as like a, you know, in your face. Yeah. Situation. And we had a situation when my eldest was like 3, where she would go in our yard and leave the door open and our dog would get out. And she did this once at grandma's house because she would just go out. She went out and played in the front yard and the dog got out at grandma's house and got lost in the neighborhood. And so I drew a comic strip. You know me well enough to know I totally did this.
Yeah,
and
she absolutely did. Yeah.
You know, here's stick figure of little girl with door open. And then here's dog running out. Here's little girl sad because the dog's gone.
I'm sorry.
And we talked it through. And then I was like, so here's another version. Your little girl shuts door. Dog is inside. Little girl is happy. So that was like a paper-based version. I'm not a great artist. Don't nobody believe that. It was a stick figure, but you know, and she got it. And it was then on, she shut the door because she understood the cause, the door was open, the effect was dog was gone, and then another effect was everyone was sad. You know, and I simplified it, but you could easily do, if we were at grandma's house, she had no toys. If we had toys, I probably would have had like the barn door was open and he left and everyone was sad. And so, oh, shut the door. That's my style. I would probably have acted it out with toys. All we have was paper. So you don't always have to like have the right object. You can just draw it out or tell it in a once upon a time story. It depending on your child's style and like your family's style. If you guys like telling stories, if you like drawing things, if you like playing. Sometimes there's like a really handy YouTube video or a Daniel Tiger episode.
I was going to say Daniel Tiger has episodes for everything. And we actually bought like the Daniel Tiger figurines. Like they're like this big. There's probably some under my feet right now. And to even carry that over of like, maybe it's something she saw on the show first, or maybe it's something that happened at home or at school and then like related, and then now we've pulled it into play as well. And so we're hitting it from like all these different angles. We also, I feel like coming at it from different perspectives, especially if it's something that's big or feels stressful to you, or feels like it's going to be a really dangerous thing, like I think it's worth trying to come at it from different ways and make it really functional for your family. So my girls share a room, and I was really worried that Caroline, who was, I don't know, 3.5 at the time, when they started sharing a room, I was really worried that she was going to like put stuff in the baby's crib that wasn't safe to be in there. Like that she was going to like put her loveys and her toys and her
a long piece of yarn
whatever.
or
yeah, like just she has the things, right? And I was really stressed that in the middle of the night when I didn't know that she was just going to put stuff in there and the baby wasn't going to be safe. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. And then similarly, we had baby toys and we practiced with the baby doll, like, here's baby doll's bed and what can go in her bed and what's safe. And the only things that can go in her bed are her baby and her swaddle, and that's it. And so we talked about it before there was an incident, like, because I was stressed that it was gonna be an incident. So we talked about it. And then I think I wrote something out, kind of like, if anyone's familiar with the social story, it's kind of some what Stephanie described, but a little more in depth. Like, I go to sleep and I sleep in my bed, and my next page, like, my sister sleeps in her crib. Next page, I sleep with 17 loveys. Next page, my baby sister sleeps with no loveys. Next page, like, babies can't sleep with loveys because they're too small and it's not safe. I can sleep with loveys because I'm a big girl, whatever, something like that. So we read that story. And again, I am not an artist like Stephanie. The drawings are terrible, but for little kids, it works just fine. They don't
They think
care.
we're great artists.
They think we're amazing. I know.
They think we're great
until
singers
I get
too.
to like kindergarten. I've had patients like kindergarten age that tell me, like, Miss Melissa, that's not a blah, blah, blah. Can I draw the dragon? And I'm like, sure, go ahead.
Not a dog. They're all dogs, by the way.
All of mine are dogs. Slightly like different manes or tails, but like, I'm like, oh, look, it's a sheep because it has some curls, but they're the same. So we did a lot of that. And then Carolyn also has two imaginary characters, not like imaginary people, but when we tell stories, like bedtime stories, she always wants them to be about the same two characters, Star and Apple. 100%. Mom, will you tell me a story about Star and Apple? And so we told a story about Star and Apple, and they went to visit this baby, because Star and Apple don't have a baby, but they went to visit a baby. And they kind of, again, we talked about that same scenario, but I threw in something like they really wanted to give the baby a lovey, and so they put it next to the crib on the floor or something like that. I don't remember. It was like, it totally just a random sentence, but like at least 3 nights a week, Caroline will still, it's been a year, like she'll choose a toy and be like, Mom, can Hattie have this in her bed? And I'll say, no, she can't. And she'll say like, okay, I'm going to put it next to the bed. So if she wakes up in the night, she'll know that I'm thinking of her. I'm like, that's the sweetest thing. But what's important is that like, that wasn't something that I mean, I guess I maybe kind of created it, but I didn't know I was creating it. My focus was on the safety piece, like nothing in the crib, nothing in the crib. And we talked about it in all these different ways. And then she then morphed it into a way that she could still feel the emotional connection, get her thing accomplished of like sharing her loveys with her baby sister within the parameters that we had set of safety.
I love that. I love the offering the safe alternative.
Yeah, just like in our low level scenarios where we
here's the paper,
tell them what we want them to do.
Yeah, instead of the marker. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories. I would also love to hear, because I know you both have some great suggestions about things that you can do to baby proof your home that maybe parents haven't thought of yet, because this is another way that we can kind of take the stress and the pressure off of us and reduce our worrying. Because let's be real, we can't always be correcting and reshaping behaviors. There has to be some time when we can cook or clean or do what needs to get done. So what are some ways that you make your house a little safer so you don't have to worry as much about your kids staying safe?
I would start with the big items. So stuff like my doors have locks. Like, I know this sounds silly, but like my screen door has a lock and it has a deadbolt. And if your child still wants to run out and they can operate a door, you can get an alarm for your door that goes way up, that even I mean, I'm not tall. Like, I need a little stool. When my children were younger, we lived in a different home and I had alarms on our doors. They're a little older now. And then when the door opens, it beeps. And that is that high danger scenario that I've identified. Our knife drawer, all of our sharp things are in one drawer and it has a little safety lock on it. Now, our spoons don't have a safety lock on it because that's over here as like an annoyance thing, right? So I try to identify what are our big things and how can I prevent those things from happening. And sometimes when kids are little, it means you don't have, I mean, I don't have nice stuff anyway, but like, you know, you're like, I'm not going to have a heavy mirror that leans on the wall that my child can pull down. I'm not going to have a TV on a stand that my child can pull down. I'm going to attach my TV up on the wall and they can't reach it, or it's going to be bolted to the wall. So I'm going to identify what those high level things are. I really do want to emphasize dressers and TVs as things that parents often forget. Dressers, TVs, and bookshelves, because the kids can pull them down. And I've seen both of my kids, you know, we talk about, you know, we stand on the floor next to the bookshelf, you know, for my older child, don't climb on the bookshelf. And then I go in there and she's climbing it. She thinks if mom can't see me and I'm not right. And I bolted it to the wall and I'm like, she's 9, but I still did it, you know?
Right. And honestly, like, trust your gut of going overboard. We didn't bolt or secure. They have like those secure straps that you can use for dressers and stuff. So it's not like bolted to the wall, but it's like bolted to the secure strap thing. We had purchased them. We had them. I had been asking my wonderful husband for a while, like, I think we need to do this. I think we need to do this. It was like on the honey-do list and didn't get done. And Caroline was not a climber, like never. She's so cautious, did not ever climb anything to save her life. And guess who pulled, I don't think she climbed it. I think she like pulled out multiple drawers and like was reaching for something and the weight, and she pulled that dresser down on herself. Thank God she was fine. That scream that I heard like across the house and through the monitor when she was supposed to be like napping or something, I don't know, when she was little, was awful. It was absolutely awful. So trust your gut. I'm so embarrassed that happened because that was my job as her mom to keep her safe. And I knew I should do it and it didn't happen. So go overboard.
Overboard with the big things.
The big safety stuff. Like I've had families that their kids have figured out how to do the handles, and the kids have figured out how to get a stool and unlock the deadbolt. And so I've had families that I recommended getting like those kinds you get at the hotel that have the flip over lock, the hotel chain, or that
even a deadbolt
across bar, or a deadbolt like at the top of the door frame.
Yeah.
Maybe not forever. Right? I'm not saying like you have to have this for your kids forever, but while this kid in particular was like getting out and escaping, and he hadn't learned.
I mean the front door, like not a bedroom door, but like
this was their
like an outside.
Yes, like this was their front door, and I think they did the door to the garage as well for this family, because this kid was getting out and escaping, and
that's a high level safety.
That's a high level safety thing, and he wouldn't, you know, once he was gone, like. He was not a kid that had learned to stop when he heard his name yelled or things like that. So we had to change that scenario before it got to running outside in the street and stopping when we say stop, because we knew he wasn't going to yet, because he hadn't learned that. So I think that's a big one. I love having the alarm, even just, we have them on our doors and windows that just go like ding, 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 or whatever the sound is. So we know that somebody opened a door.
Not necessarily a bad sound. It's just
it's literally
FYI,
like
the door's open.
Yeah. And then you just kind of look around like, okay, it wasn't you. Like, what's going on? Who else? Oh, it's the 4-year-old. And they make a lot of them that like will link to your phone. So you can get a phone alert also, if that's more your techie style, which I like. We also have those, I've had families that say like, oh, we live with somebody else. We live with a roommate or a grandparent, and they don't want the cabinet locks that you can see, because they're not attractive. I get that. They make, have you seen the magnet ones that go inside?
Yeah. My sister has
like,
those.
Yeah.
Oh,
so they're
I
like,
couldn't even figure it out at first.
Right. It's kind of weird. They're like inside the cabinet, there's like this little thing that's magnet locked. And then you have like a key. It's just a big magnet circle. And you just put it on the outside, and then it opens it. And then when you're done, you just put the magnet back. Ours is on our fridge. So we have those, which I think is a nice balance if you don't want to put the big ugly ones on the front.
And I'll confess my lazy person approach. So we had the lock on the knife drawer, and that was it. And that was because I kind of find them annoying. And what I did was all of our chemicals are up in a really high cupboard. Everything that's on the bottom was stuff that I was okay with my kids handling. It became like a low level concern, right? Where I'm like annoyed if they pull all the cookie sheets out, but are they going to get hurt? No. And sometimes I'm like, please bring the cookie sheets out so that you're entertained for like 10 minutes. You know, so I have Tupperware, I had pots and pans, I had my mixer with like the little attachments that were very easy to use, okay for kids to interact with. I had canned goods and pots and pan kinds of things. And then everything that was like breakable, like not like I have nice things, but like dishes that were ceramic were up high, glasses up high. I have kids plastic, kids like cups and stuff down low. And I also did that because eventually I'm like, get a cup. And they're like, oh, I can get my own cup because I have it really low. You put it really weirdly down in this bottom cupboard, but then
ours is in the same place.
2-year-old can go get their own cup. And so I kind of made some choices about what was accessible. And in our bathroom, it was the same thing. The lower cupboards have bath toys. And so there's like a bucket with bath toys and you can get the bucket out. So stuff that I didn't really want them getting was not accessible in the first place. So I didn't have to be like, okay, are they getting in the knives? Are they getting in the pointy spike drawer? Like, no, I don't have those things, or they're out of reach. And that kind of alleviates a little of the stress about running around being like, no. And you're kind of, you know, nobody has a nice house. We'll just clean it up later at the end of the day, sort of, you know, let them, ish, or you shut the door of that room that you don't want them going in.
Well, and I think too that those lines of like what feels like doable for you or like the lazy version is different for every person and changes. Like for my older one, we only had the locks on the safety things, like for the under the kitchen sink and, you know, wherever the like big dangerous ones were. For my little one, like pandemic life, second kid parenting, like I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with 600 Tupperwares all over my kitchen floor every day. Like I can't handle it. So guess what? Tupperware drawer, even though same thing, it's on the low shelf, it got a lock because I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal and was like, you know what? Now, if we leave it unlocked, which sometimes happens, it's not a safety thing because it's just Tupperware. But that was a change for us because I needed to have that shut, and that's okay.
And that's you bring up a good point that your different kids, different time,
different.
Different.
And you know, and kids will still get into things that you think are going to be fine. And then you reassess, like Hattie loves to play with like the little square tea bag things, which is fine. She like takes them out of the drawer and she like throws them around and we clean them up. And I'm like,
sealed packets with tea bags in it.
Package of tea. Yeah, like it's sealed. I'm like, great. You do you, girl. So she's been playing with those for weeks. She loves it. Yesterday, she comes out of the little kitchen area and she has like 2 little tea bags in her hand, like the sealed tea bag containers in her hand. I'm like, oh, no big deal. Then I look at her and she has like paper stuff. And I'm like, oh geez. So I go over there. She has eaten a hole in the sealed paper container thing, but yet she has continued to eat through it and has eaten through the tea bag material and has flakes of chamomile like all over her, in her mouth, everywhere. And she's like, pleh, pleh, pleh. I'm like, yeah, kid, like you're eating tea bags. Like that's gross.
But it's not bad.
Not hugely dangerous. You know, it was just one and we cleaned her up and gave her water and she's fine. But that might be something that now we have to move because maybe she's going to go for those again. And eventually, if she ate multiple tea bags, like that would be a safety concern. So things change. We pivot. That's fine.
Thank you,
The
guys.
other thing I learned is that my dishwasher has a lock button. And I never had to use the lock button with my oldest. And I still to this day, because they want to go over and go beep, 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 like, ooh, beep, beep, beep. And then pretty soon, and you're like, oh my God, who turned the dishwasher on? So control lock on things is nice.
The other thing that you guys kind of mentioned, but I just want to reiterate, it would be windows. Because I have known a lot of families whose kids have changed and they suddenly have increased mobility and they climb on a dresser and maybe a window's open because it's summer, or they are crafty and they've opened the window and they fall out. And that is another one of those high level safety concerns. And you can buy super cheap at Home Depot little locks that you put on the window so you can only open it so much so nobody can fit out. You guys had mentioned the alarms, but that's just something that I've seen a lot, like more than once. And I don't want to overly alarm anybody, but just to put it on your radar, because I never want that situation to happen to anyone.
No, that's when I always mention to families. I was like, lock second-story windows and balconies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's a one-time accident that nobody wants. And when so our current home has, it's on a split level, and part of it is not first story. And I literally, both of my children, even though they were older, their windows still don't open more than this much. And I actually brought their little heads over, like the really extra person I am. I'm like, can your head fit through this gap I have allowed? Like, and they're like, what are you doing, mommy? I'm like, can you stick your head through that? And they tried and they can't do it. I'm like, okay, that's the level. That's
safe,
where it's
we're
at.
good.
Mm-hmm. And then I put fire escape ladders in their rooms too, the little foldable ones that you can put over the edge if they need to climb down. That's just in case.
Have a safety plan. That's
another safety plan.
That's maybe a conversation for another day, and the little older kids, or maybe not. I think it's great to like talk about safety and what you would do in an emergency situation. And you guys had mentioned like acting things out in play or reading stories and kind of reiterating and repeating over and over. Like, if we were to have a fire, then I do X, Y, and Z, such a thing. So that's another great kind of scenario to keep in mind. And I guess I have two more questions. One would be, how important is it to you that you don't scare your child? Like, how do you teach without scaring them? Because some of these situations, like falling out of a window or running into the street, like those are scary things, running away from your house. So how do you educate your child about them in a serious way, but without scaring them? Or maybe you do scare them, and that's okay, because your job is to keep them safe, not.
I think that a lot of those type of scenarios are scary to us as adults because we know what could happen, right? We have seen things on TV, or we know kids that have gotten hurt, or we can see those ramifications of you run out, you get hit by a car, all these things that happen. And so we feel that fear very innately. I think that it's important when you're talking to your kids about those things, that you are serious about it, so that they know that it's a big deal. But as long as you kind of talk through the scenario and talk through some potential, dangers or situations of why it could be a problem, and then kind of let them guide some of that conversation, I don't think they're going to be scared like we are, because we don't want them to be scared that they can't cross the street if they're holding your hand.
Right.
Because you've created, like, you're not trying to create fear, but you're trying to create
caution,
and some reality behind it. But oftentimes, if you bring those kind of things up and you talk through a situation, and if they have some questions, you let their questions kind of guide the level that matches what they're thinking about in terms of their emotions and their processing and their language. And I've been surprised more than once, both by patients and by my kids, at both the depth of the questions that they have, but also things that I think are going to be these huge, scary conversations. And then they're like, okay, yeah, I know, Mom, that's because we talked about it and blah, 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 and there could be a fire and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, can I go eat my chicken sandwich? And I'm like, yes. Right. And they're fine. And I get scared and they're fine.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan of like not telling the truth. Sometimes I'll tell like an age appropriate version of that truth, but I'm not going to say, oh, don't go near the window just because I said not to. I'll be like,
right,
because this, we're at your aunt's house and she lives in this vintage house. And if you lean on this glass, it will break and you'll be cut on your hand. Yeah. That's why. Right. And I don't want them to be like, oh, cut. Oh, and I don't want to like protect them from the idea of cuts, because cuts happen. And I want them to have an eyes wide open understanding that's appropriate to their age.
Yeah.
And we're definitely, unfortunately, a scared straight household, like a little bit like you have to wear your seatbelt because
it's
I've
not a
met kids
choice.
who didn't wear their seatbelts and it didn't go well. You know, like it's,
Yeah.
but
And
it's,
and I think we have certain things that we just say are not a choice. You know, like wearing your seatbelt, not a choice. Not jumping off your bunk bed, not a choice. Like things are just set up as this is not a choice. This is not a safe choice. We don't do this. Like, here's why, the end. And there's no wiggle room. There's no negotiation. And
that's
that
a
works,
good point.
And that works for our family. It may not work for everybody, but I think because we don't approach everything that way, we do give them lots of choice and independence in other situations. That when we have these safety rules of like, you will not touch the stove handles. Like she knows, like I don't do that. That's not safe. That's not again, not a safe choice. I think I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. Because that's not a big deal.
Right.
But the stove handles is.
Right. And speaking of stove handles, they also do make stove handle covers and stove handle like lock things.
And ours pop off. Ask me how I know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Probably for
it's real hard to turn them without the handle. Just let you know, if you have a problem at this moment and you can't run out and get them, you can pop a lot of stoves, you can pop the handles off.
Yeah. I think the big picture thought that we want to share is what you're doing as parents is you're creating a safe environment as best you can, like physically, like changing things in your environment, and then adjusting with language and adjusting with support the things that happen because life happens. But setting yourself up for success as best you can from the beginning, or when you realize it's an issue, like I didn't know my tea bags were an issue. Maybe we're going to move those, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you for kind of summarizing. And I've got one last question just to round this out here. And it has to do, like, as speech therapists, we know tons and tons of kids. So we have a really good idea of when a behavior is kind of a typical toddler behavior, when it's maybe something that's dangerous, but it's something that most kids do, versus a dangerous behavior or a situation in which a child could really benefit from some extra support and the family could benefit from kind of like professional intervention to help keep their child safe, because it's kind of outside of this boundary of what would be expected for toddlers. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit to kind of when do you know when it's time to ask for help, and how do you do that? What does it look like? I don't know if either one of you wants to hop in here.
I think a lot of that depends on the family. And I'm pretty liberal about asking for help, because the risk versus benefit of asking for help is, the risk is you've made a phone call and the potential benefit could be life-saving. So if you're feeling like I'm struggling with this issue with my child, I'm struggling with feeling like I'm keeping them safe, I'm struggling with, I'm tired, I feel like I'm saying no all the time, I don't know what to do, I'm struggling, then you get help. There's a lot of, it's not like, and now, it's not black and white that there's like, everybody's great or there's something really wrong. It's like all of us in our parenting journey have had moments where we needed a little extra help. And there are places where you can have somebody just sort of talk to you, give you some ideas, even just be a sounding board, all the way up to like a professional can come to your home and help develop an intervention plan for behavior. And there's everything in between. And so my opinion is there really isn't that moment where like you're okay, oh, you're not okay. It's personal. And a lot of parents, and I'm speaking about myself too, like all of us have sometimes are quietly struggling, and you look on social media and everybody else looks like they have their stuff together and they're all at the pumpkin patch and they're matching sweaters. But in reality, we're all struggling, and it's okay to ask for help. You'll find out that everybody's having a hard time quietly behind the scenes. And so when in doubt, I would ask. Yeah. That's my soapbox about that. What do you want to add, Melissa?
I absolutely agree with all of that. I also think that if, as a family, if you guys have been working on some safety things for a while, like if you've been working on trying to redirect and not using the no's or trying to save those for safety moments and danger moments, and you feel like you've been working on it and it's not clicking, or your child is, you've done everything that you can figure out to do, or gotten some ideas from other, parent friends, or read a book or listened to this video or whatever, and you feel like your child is still not listening in those safety moments to know or stop, or responding to their name when you have that big scary tone of voice, that you can't keep them safe when something happens, because things happen, I think that's a good time to ask for some help. Help to figure out what other ways can we teach my child these strategies, because this isn't like learning your ABCs, or learning something that you're going to learn when you get to school. Like, this is something that's important every day, right now, right? Keeping your kids safe. Like, I tell my girls, like, this is my number one job, is to keep you safe. And if things aren't clicking and you're putting in all the effort you can, then get somebody else to be on your team that can help you as a family work through helping your kid learn these things, or changing more things at home, or giving you more ideas, or putting more locks on, or whatever it may be. But getting more people on your team is important.
Every child has a different style. So you may have been like, well, everything was working well with child A, and now we have child B. And it turns out child B has like a totally different style, different communication style, different understanding of the world. And you were all set up for child A, and now you're like, it's not working. It doesn't fit this time. And that is why people like us have jobs, because there's, the bag of tricks, like, for this style, try this. And so it's okay not to have the answers, and it's okay to ask somebody who's, okay, I do this at my job. I can give you some tips and tricks.
Yeah.
And when we say ask somebody, I just want to explain a little bit more. We're talking about, I always recommend to parents to talk to their pediatrician, because your pediatrician knows about a lot of resources and people in your community who can support you. And I also will link in the notes to this video a link to the CDC website for early intervention. And early intervention is a word that we use to refer to essentially any sort of support or teaching that we give to children under the age of 3. And every state in the United States offers early intervention services to children, just like children can go to school. Once they're old enough, children can get support when they're under the age of 3 as well. And so what you can, free
support.
Free support. And so you can use the website. There's a list of all the states. You'll click on the name of your state, and there'll be a phone number that you can call, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. Lots of the early intervention programs are like a big umbrella, and there's lots of different things that happen underneath that umbrella. So you might talk to a few people on the phone, but that's okay. It's a great resource. And if you don't know where to start, I highly encourage you to.
And it's for lots of different concerns. Even if you're just like, I'm just kind of have some questions about potty training, like that falls under the umbrella. And I've called them and gotten some great resources just for my kids. I've known a lot of people who have gone through their early intervention program within their state for lots of different things. So it's not for like total red flag, serious concerns. It could be for something minor.
Yeah. Take advantage of it. We all pay taxes, so use it. All right. Well, thank you guys. Is there anything you want to say before we end the conversation? I think we've doing great.
You are doing great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for your time. I hope that everyone enjoys this video and that you're feeling even a smidge more confident about keeping your child safe at home. Please feel free to leave questions in the comments below, and we'll do our best to get back and answer all of you. Thanks.